Howdy doody, buckaroonies, and welcome back to another episode of Morning Coffee with Cameron. My friends over at UVI just released a new sound library called Quadra, Metal, and Wood, and in this video we're going to be taking a deep dive into this library and taking a look at what it has to offer by way of movin', groovin', shakin', rhythmic, metal, woody goodness. Quadra, Metal, and Wood runs inside of the free UVI workstation and of course can also be run inside of Falcon if you want to take this library up to a whole other dimension of sound design goodness and weirdness. Quadra, Metal, and Wood is available right now, so if you want to check it out for yourself, you can do so with the link down below. And of course, today's video is also brought to you by my friends over at UVI, so big thank you to them for helping to support the channel. With that, let's take a listen to some of the sounds of this new library with some presets designed by none other than ya boy right here. So with that, let's take a deeper dive under the hood of Quadra here and talk about how it works and what it's doing, because as complex of a library and instrument as this is, it's actually really straightforward to make your own patches. Here I've got just an initialized preset up, nothing fancy, just the same thing across all 4 layers. So we can actually do quite a bit from the main page of Quadra here. We can select a sound for each of the layers. All the sounds are sorted into different categories. We're not going to go over all of them because there's quite a few to choose from. There are also presets for the ARP for each layer. So we've got a couple initialized ones and then things like bass lines, chords, and other basic stuff. We can quickly key split things with the key split function here. So we can click the headphone icon to learn the bottom key and then the top key. So that's pretty easy if you want to create split instruments, or you can click and drag like that. We have the octave switch, we have sends for reverb and delay, and then finally we have the keyboard balance here, and that's pretty much it. We also have a master power here for all arpeggiators, and we can also randomize the arpeggiators and randomize the sound, so that's good to know, and you can kind of shuffle around and get some different patch ideas that way. In the center, we have the XY controller, so we can use this to morph between A, B, C, and D, and you can do that as you want. You can even do that with the sliders here. You can MIDI learn this as well, so that can be handy. Then we have the intensity area here. This just controls the overall dynamics and how hard the hardest hits are, as well as a tension curve here to adjust between logarithmic and exponential or linear, just depending on what kind of response you want when you're playing things. Down in the bottom, we have a couple more controls to know about, the pitch bend range and the mapping, so we can have these mapped to all be the same MIDI channel or have them mapped to individual MIDI channels 1, 2, 3, and 4. At the very top, we have controls for each of the layers to mute and solo them. We have a volume slider for each layer as well as a panning control. Then over here, we have the effects as well as the master output. Up at the top, if you click on a letter, that opens up the menu for that individual layer. So here we've got the sends over in the top right. We have an amp envelope. We've got a filter with a filter envelope, filter drive, velocity response, and a mod wheel response. Pitch and voicing here, we can change the color, which is kind of like a formant, kind of like a filter, but not really. The octave control, semitone control, and then down here we have the unison voicing option. So we have none, which means no unison or anything. Alternate, which will pan out each voice alternating left and right with the intensity controlled by spread. And finally, unison classic, which we can spread out the unison in the stereo field and control the amount of detuning. Down in the bottom left, we have the expression area. This is vibrato, tremolo, frequency shifter, and drive. Each of these can be mapped to the mod wheel as well if you click the wheel button or increase the wheel depth here. Velocity response and a couple other things, just nice and easy to add some expression and movement with the mod wheel, or just add some vibrato if you want that. In the effects side of things, we can enable frequency shifter, wave shaper with multiple modes over here, a chorus effect, phaser, and finally an equalizer, which is on each individual layer. Moving into the ARP area, this is where things start to get interesting. So I'm going to solo out layer A here, and we can just play a chord. We can go in and change the velocity for each of these or randomize it. Maybe we'll just do that. We get controls for the type of each step. So there's things like a regular step, a harmonized step. So we could add like a fifth and a octave down and then a octave up. We could do things like a chord. So I'm going to do the chord as it was played, maybe a chord inverted and one more chord. Maybe we'll do inverted -1 over here so we can hold down that same chord. And get a pretty different sound. We have controls for pitch and octave, gate, repeat, so we can add some repeats here, which can be kind of fun, and panning for each of these individual steps. So let's randomize that. And we've created a cool sequence. We have up to 4 pages here. We can have these linked, or we can unlink them to add differences to each page of steps. Maybe we'll do something sort of like that. I don't really know. And we can control the endpoint if you want to do some offset things, which can be a bit of fun, which we'll explore here in a moment. There's also 2 different modes. We have arpeggiator and phaser. Phaser just plays through things kind of like a step sequencer. Arpeggiator is an arpeggiator. We have controls here for the max velocity, the number of steps, the rate, the gate length. We have Euclidean emphasis, which can add a Euclidean rhythm to things. Let's maybe move that. We'll just leave that at that octave. Let's try that. So that's kind of fun. We have MIDI effect here. I'm going to add some octave up shimmery stuff. And then finally, the scale quantizer here. If we enable this, we can have auto mode or manually set it, and we can set between all of the standard scales you'd probably want to use. One really cool feature to know about as well is the ability to record the MIDI output of all this. So if you come up with a cool sequence and you want to use it for something else in your session, you can record, hold down whatever you want to do, stop recording, and then click and drag that MIDI into your DAW. Moving on to the effects tab here, we have the reverb, delay, drive, which can be enabled by clicking up here, compressor, enabled by clicking up here, and finally a master EQ, as well as a master maximizer. So, as you can probably imagine, doing all this across 4 layers is pretty powerful and leads to some really interesting patches without a whole lot of effort, because you can combine so many different sounds and rhythms and effects and responses to things like velocity and the mod wheel and all that good stuff. With all that out of the way, let's make a patch. I think we'll leave this first one on marimba cotton. I'm going to change this to maybe something like the music box, because that's always cool. Maybe we'll do something with keys here. Guitar keys is a really good one. And maybe we'll do, I don't know, keyboards on this last one. Maybe we'll do E piano bass. So now we've got this. That's kind of cool. Not really digging the music box though. Let's try maybe one more keyboard thing here. Cool, that sounded good, but everything is pretty boring. I'm gonna go into A here. Let's just randomize the velocity and panning to start things off, and let's change some of these step types. Now let's adjust the playback rate of this first layer and maybe do something odd like 15 steps. This is one of my favorite tricks for doing cool sequences. Now we'll move on to layer B and do something sort of similar. I think we'll drop this one down to 13 steps and maybe just disable a couple steps to get kind of a cool rhythm thing. Do a couple harmonized steps and maybe randomize the panning. Actually, on this one, I think what we'll do instead, let's do Euclidean emphasis, maybe something about like that. And then in the sound tab, we'll go into alternate mode to make this nice and wide. Cool, so combining that with layer 1, now we're starting to get somewhere. All right, let's move on to layer C. This one I think we're gonna keep pretty straightforward. I'm gonna do maybe dotted eighth notes. Let's do Euclidean emphasis on this one as well. Maybe add the MIDI effect and just disable a couple of random steps to get a bit more bounce and groove to everything, something about like that. And then we'll shift the octave every so often and maybe add a repeat on this last step. Okay, maybe we won't do the dotted eighths on that. I think let's go for regular 16ths and then maybe slow layer B down a bit and try dotted eighths on that one. Or maybe we'll just do regular eighths. That might sound a bit more musical. Now, finally, let's move on to D. Do something sort of random, kind of like that. I'm gonna add some chords on this and some harmonized steps. And I think we ought to be in business. Let's try maybe a bit of filtering on this layer. Now back on the main tab here, let's start sending these out to some effects and then tweak the effects a bit. Sweet, so I think I'm pretty happy with that. I've slowed this down now to 88 beats a minute to get something a bit more groovalicious. So let's give this patch a play and hear what we've created with Quadra, Metal, and Wood. So that is a look at the new UVI Quadra Metal and Wood library. As with just about anything UVI does, I of course think this is great. The sound quality and sample quality is fantastic. They've done a really good job at offering a pretty extensive library of different sounds and textures, and for as complex as Quadra is under the hood, it's actually pretty straightforward to use, and I think a very useful tool for scoring and things like that, or just adding a bit of organic movement and groovement to your tracks. With that, a very big thank you to UVI once again for involving me in the sound design process of this instrument. I had a ton of fun making presets for this library, and of course, thank you to them as well for sponsoring today's video and helping to support the channel. If you want to check this library out for yourself, it's available now. You could do so at the link down below. That's it. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. And as always, I hope this inspires you to get out there and make something awesome.